as one of you also very clearly pointed out, his theory also kind of doesn't say much about kind of power, so that these rituals could be used by certain individuals to do certain maybe detestful acts. One of you says, well, in one of these examples, Durkheim talks about how women are taken, one man will have kind of multiple sexual relations with a woman, and this person writing, I forgot to write down who it was in our class, said, well, isn't that a bit of a problem for those women who might not see that as ideal? And especially in our day and age where that wouldn't be an okay thing to do in a ritual in terms of taking multiple wives or kind of sexually dominating somebody else. It becomes clear that, boy, these rituals sometimes might have the possibility to kind of get a little out of control, and people might do things that are so kind of outside the norm that they actually don't fit with what the society's ideal of itself is. So there's a couple of problems with Durkheim that are important to keep in mind. And finally, maybe one of the even more important problems is that it's not clear how his examples from this very primitive society perfectly map on to today, to helping us understand religions of today. What is helpful, though, is that he does seem to uncover some real important things about ritual, how it's a special moment where what happens in the ritual guides the rest of a society's life. He shows us why it is that symbols and beliefs are so important, and it's because a lot of emotion of the group is directed and invested towards that. He also shows how important it is that kind of the moral power of the group kind of in our head, which occurs through our participation in rituals, can really guide us and can guide religious believers that are part of a religious group with its rituals. So in conclusion, before I get to your questions, we see that there are different ways to view rituals. And some of you ask, well, so in the end, well, what is ritual? Well, for the purposes of our class, I think we might land a little bit more towards a understanding of a ritual in which we say that rituals are usually patterned over time. They're usually organized and enacted by a group of people. And they're connected with beliefs or symbols so that the ritual is given meaning, and then the ritual itself gives meaning to the activities of religious members when they are in their daily lives or when they're no longer surrounded by that group for the rest of their week. So that's kind of a general overview of what we're talking about when we're talking about rituals. Now let me get to some of your questions. I'm going to field a number of these because you guys had some great questions from the reading, and you guys are doing a really good job at struggling to say, like, what the hell is this reading saying? And for the most part, you're really getting it. So I'll just grab a number of questions. Ricky writes, why do so many people watch the Super Bowl? Well, if we take Durkheim seriously, we could say it might be because it's a core social ritual for our national social group. And by partaking in Super Bowl, whether or not you like football, might be a way to kind of reconnect bonds and bring back kind of a social feeling that may have died off during the rest of the year. So that's a very Durkheimian response to your question. Maurice asks, my question this week is, why is the Super Bowl considered a ritual? It does not appear that it has any religious meaning. Well, you're exactly right. The Super Bowl doesn't have any religious meaning. But what Durkheim does, remember with his functional understanding of religion, it shows us that a ritual is a part of any social group. And so therefore, if we can understand ritual in one social group, we can understand it for another social group, even if this other social group is a religious group. Let's see here. Amanda asked, does snake handling, like in the Covington reading, actually occur? Yes. You can actually look up Covington's name in Amazon.com. He wrote a whole book about snake handling groups that are in the mountains, as I said before, of eastern Kentucky and West Virginia and Tennessee. Snake handling is rare. I believe it's also illegal, and it's quite dangerous too. But it connects with a belief taken from the Old Testament readings of the Bible and some New Testament writings, that snakes represent a certain evil force in the world, and that if we can overcome our fear of that evil and control that evil, that says something about our ability, our beliefs, but also our ability as religious persons to live out our beliefs. So it is rare, but yes, it does happen, and it's a really interesting book he writes. So I'd recommend looking it up. Shamika and Michelle basically ask variants of the same question. Shamika writes, a question I have is everything we do a ritual? And Michelle writes, well, how do we determine when something is considered a ritual? And I said a minute ago, in some ways, if we took all of these three understandings of ritual, literally we could say everything's a ritual. But when you say everything is something, then it doesn't become that useful. But as I argued a couple of minutes ago, in terms of religious rituals, we can make some decisions about it's a patterned activity that happens over time, usually involves a group, it's connected to meaning, and these rituals are meant to guide kind of the understandings and behavior of individuals throughout various moments of their lives. These are really good questions. Just a couple more. Caitlin asks, with society being similar to religion, and religion also needing to become internal to the person, is that how religion stops? When a religion is no longer internal to the members, is this what ends religion? Well, of course, there's other ways that ends religion. For example, a social group or a religious group being conquered, co-opted, people dying out. There's various ways religion ends. But in a real sense, too, religions can end if rituals themselves peter out. If they lose some of their meaning, if something so rocks a religious group, or rituals become so kind of formal or kind of done in a routinized way, then that may really affect a religious group's ability to kind of keep that ritual engaged, or to keep that ritual going in a way that engages person and makes them part of their group. So it's no surprise that a lot of times that religious groups, as well as other groups like nations, corporations, schools, oftentimes basically redo their rituals when they feel they need a change. Maybe shift the way graduation looks like, or change up that weekly Monday morning at the local corporation, or change up the inauguration ceremony or the halftime at the Super Bowl as a way of kind of bringing more energy and life back to the social group. Kendall asks, Durkheim states that religion can only be conceived as the force of a collective group with certain beliefs. I disagree with this because I feel like religion can be addressed individually. Are there any major theorists who would agree with me? My answer is yes. And we're going to read one in a couple weeks. William James wrote a lot on individual religious and spiritual experiences. So he's definitely a theorist that would agree with you, and we'll get back to him. Natalie asks, if society continually creates sacred things, can society abolish things that were once deemed sacred? Well, yeah. Think, for example, of early United States history of citizenship being allowed for basically men with property. Well, over time, that was kind of seemed a sacred status that allowed somebody to be kind of a civically responsible person and involved in politics. But that's clearly changed over time. And for many and various reasons, social movements being a big part of it. But yes, what was once kind of a core belief and had a sacred status to it has changed. Or maybe another one would be the role of marriage in our society, which was, especially in the 1950s, was a high point of an era. Being a lifelong continuity at all costs as a sacred ideal has definitely shifted. Now, we could argue about the pros and cons of that, but we can definitely say that kind of a sacred ideal can change for a group. Another one, too, is in the Roman Catholic Church. When John F. Kennedy was elected, 1960, people were worried about the Catholic Church's belief that it should be basically a ruling or a governing authority in a country. Well, that's all totally changed for the Catholic religious group. And it no longer sees itself in that role, but as a parallel role with a state authority. So yes, things change. That's sociology. Let's see here. Annika asks, how are sacred things that society creates actually made into sacred objects or symbols? If so, can anyone create sacred objects or symbols and believe that they are indeed sacred? Well, this is interesting. Durkheim doesn't give us a full description of this, except to say that it has something to do with symbols and objects being central, being part of these moments of emotional ritual activity, and importantly, being able to carry the meaning of a group throughout